Big night for Democrats. I'm wearing my blue for the wave, a tsunami, perhaps. Do you like the content? I feel like I'm saying that every time. Anyway, we would love for you to subscribe. Please subscribe. Every YouTuber tells me that it's annoying, but it gets results if you keep asking. So subscribe. And here's our conversation with Congressman Ritchie Torres.
Welcome to Raging Moderates. I'm Scott Galloway.
And I'm Jessica Tarlov.
That was the hard part of the program, Jess, where you got to introduce yourself. What was the pause there? Did you go out last night? Did you party hard? Is ketamine and Xanax in your system right now?
Honestly, watching like the school board results roll in from Bucks County, Pennsylvania was better than any night that I've had out maybe in the last decade. So no, I did not go out. I watched every broadcast and was doom scrolling, but it wasn't doom. It was great. It was positive scrolling.
I did something by choice I haven't done in 2 years. I turned on live television, which I haven't done in a long time. So here to help us with this Blue Tsunami themed party is Congressman Ritchie Torres. Congressman, great to have you. Are you ready to kind of blue out with us this morning?
I'm all in.
He's all in. All right. Democrats are so back. Election night was a full-on blue wave. Big wins across New Jersey, Virginia, and California. In New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill's race was supposed to be close. Instead, it looked pretty decisive. And in Virginia, Abigail Spanberger made history as the state's first woman governor, while Democrats swept the rest of the statewide races, even after the late-breaking tech scandal in the AG race. But maybe the biggest headline came from our neck of the woods, or I should really say your neck of the woods, Jess, and also the congressman's. New York City, Zoran Mamdani, a 34-year-old Democratic socialist, beat Andrew Cuomo to become mayor. He ran on rent relief, anti-corruption, and working-class issues, and somehow turned a long-shot campaign into a national moment. I would say his focus was affordability. But anyways, so the story isn't just that Democrats won, it's how they won. Progressives, including Mamdani, and moderates such as Spanberger both crushed it. Meanwhile, MAGA world is in full-blown meltdown. Trump's already blaming the shutdown and candidate quality, saying he wasn't on the ballot, and he's not wrong because the GOP keeps tanking whenever Trump isn't actually running. Let's watch a bit of what he told Republican senators this morning.
But I thought we'd have a discussion after the press leaves about what last night represented and what we should do about it, and also about the shutdown, and how that relates to last night. I think if you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans, and that was a big factor. And they say that I wasn't on the ballot was the biggest factor, but I don't know about that, but I was honored that they said that. And I just want to thank everybody for being here, and a very special thanks to Vice President J.D. Vance, who's doing a terrific job. J.D., thank you.
So would love to get your general take or how you feel this morning, or what some broader themes or insights are, Congressman.
Look, I think of the 2025 election as the pre-midterms. Mm-hmm. It was a referendum on Donald Trump. It was an overwhelming rejection of Donald Trump. You know, Vice President Kamala Harris won New Jersey and Virginia by less than 6 points. Like Abigail Spanberger outran Kamala Harris by 7 points. Mikey Sherrill by 8 points. And keep in mind, Jack Ciattarelli only lost by 3 points or 2 points in 2021. He lost by double digits in 2025. And the difference between then and now is Donald Trump. Like the presidency of Donald Trump has become an albatross around the neck of Republicans. You know, after the 2024 election, I publicly said that the greatest achievement of Donald Trump lies not in breaking the blue wall in the industrial Midwest, but in beginning to break the blue wall in states like New Jersey and New York and making historic inroads among working class Latinos in particular. Those gains have all but dissipated. Like one of the question marks that arose from the 2024 election was, to what extent is Donald Trump sui generis? To what extent is his appeal to working class people of color transferable to the rest of the Republican Party? We now have an answer to that question. That appeal has all but vanished.
Jess, I know you like me hate your life less and less today. What are your thoughts?
I mean, mostly that. I second the comments by Congressman Torres, and would just add to it that you saw Republicans, at least in these marquee races in New Jersey and in Virginia, making the mistakes that Democrats did in the 2024 election. Like Jack Ciattarelli had a layup opportunity when Donald Trump came for the infrastructure funding for the Gateway Tunnel, which is this massively important artery to connect New Jersey and New York and how people get to work. And he refused to condemn the moves by the government. He didn't fight for the people of New Jersey in a state which is all about fight, right? Like my husband's from New Jersey. It is endemic to the people there that they want a brawler. And Jack Ciattarelli gave Donald Trump an A grade in the debate and didn't stand up for the people of New Jersey. And I think that cost him a lot. Mikey Sherrill's campaign until the last few weeks, I thought was weaker than Abigail Spanberger's. We all knew Spanberger was going to win. People were talking about margins in the 8 to 10 points kind of all along. And Winsome Earl-Sears is not a strong candidate by any stretch of the imagination and couldn't even get Donald Trump's endorsement. But Mikey had been running, I don't want to say lackluster, but it certainly didn't feel as sparkly as it did in the last few weeks. And she was very much energized by the fact that Jack Ciattarelli could not think for himself. That is kind of the overarching message, I think, of this election, that candidates, no matter what denomination of Democratic politics they have, they were people who thought for themselves. And that's everywhere from what Mamdani did here in New York, and I'm desperate to hear what Ritchie thinks about that, to all of these folks that run in the Virginia House of Delegates for those seats. I mean, it is a massive turn of events to now have, 66 seats in the delegate house. Hat tip to Speaker Don Scott, who did a great recruitment job. But they focused on people with passion who know their communities and who aren't afraid to stand up for what's right. And they were rewarded on Election Day. It was very exciting.
Representative, what do you think Mamdani's win says about the Democratic Party or the nation as a whole?
Well, look, I mean, keep in mind that the Democratic Party is an ideologically varied coalition, right? That ranges from Democratic Socialists to Blue Dog Democrats. And so there's no one-size-fits-all model, right? Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill are quite different from Zohran Mamdani, but the common thread among all of them is a laser-sharp focus on affordability and resistance to Donald Trump, right? The Democratic Party is in a fighting mood, and those are three Democrats who are able and willing and eager to fight Donald Trump. Mamdani is just an objectively revolutionary figure. And I feel like the outcome of the election represents as much a media revolution as it does an ideological revolution. I mean, he harnessed the power of vertical video campaigning to transform politics in New York City and maybe even in America writ large, much like FDR harnessed the power of radio, or JFK the power of television, or Donald Trump the power of Twitter. So he is a political entrepreneur who took a risk and ran a race that very few people thought he would win. And he won in a way that we've never seen before, and won decisively. And so I have immense respect for the political skill that he has demonstrated.
Jess?
Scott, what do you think? Well, I mean, I love that political entrepreneur. I feel like that's perfect Scott Galloway material.
I think it has less impact than people think. I thought it was ridiculous that we were talking. First off, I thought it was totally overblown, and is overblown in terms of what this means for America. A mayor is an operational role. His job is to collect the trash. And the notion somehow that someone in the Knesset from Tel Aviv thinks, well, let's call Mamdani and see what he thinks about anything to do with Israel. The fact that people believe all this discussion around taxes, quite frankly, he's not going to get any of this shit through. He doesn't have the power.
I disagree. I disagree.
Go ahead. Say more.
So you're absolutely right. I think of the mayor as two roles. It's a governmental role, to your point, but the mayor's a cultural figure. Like the mayor has an international platform, and when the mayor speaks, he listens. Right? There are issues on which I technically have more governmental authority than the mayor of New York, but the mayor has more attentional power.
The pulpit.
The mayor commands an audience.
Yeah.
And when I met Mamdani, and I suspect I told him what he already knows, is I said to him, you should replicate de Blasio's success while learning from his failure, right? And what was de Blasio's success? He ran on a bold idea like universal pre-kindergarten. He secured the funding he needed from Albany, and then he proceeded to implement the largest and most successful universal pre-kindergarten program in the country. Where de Blasio, I think, went wrong was the tensions with the police department. When those officers turned their backs on him in December of 2014, That destabilized his administration permanently. He never fully recovered from it. So Mamdani has a genuine movement behind him, and he can harness the power of that movement to impose his will on Albany. I feel like he's going to have, if I were a betting man, I would bet that he gets the free buses and he gets the tax increase.
But for example, just on an opera, so there's two things here. First off, Representative Torres, I just want to highlight that I think you have been a real leader, and as someone who's been outspoken on Israel and sees the immense amount of pushback and shit you get, you have been fearless around this stuff and speaking with your conscience, and I think people very much respect that, or I know I do. A lot of my Jewish brothers and sisters have asked me to be more outspoken against Mamdani. And my view is, look, I just don't think that's the hill we want to die on. I don't think he's going to have much influence over policy in Israel. And I have, while some of the things he says are disqualifying for me, I don't get to vote, I'm a Florida resident, I think you give him the benefit of the doubt. And when he says, I'm not an anti-Semite, you take him at his word and you follow his actions. And the mayor is largely an operational role meant to make sure the water coming out of your tap is clean and the trains run on time, et cetera. The reality is there's certain pragmatic things that don't get votes. We have a fare toll jumping problem. If you go into the subway, if you just sit there at I forget what we call it, the turnstiles for a minute, you're going to see people just jump the turnstiles. We lose $1 billion a year. The free buses will cost us $600 million a year. So if we had actual policing and laws enforced, we could pay for the buses. But see, these are the types of debates I think we should be having when we're talking about the mayor, not about foreign policy. In addition,
I agree with that.
Rent freezes, I taught economics. Everything I know is counter to that actually will end up increasing rents, but that's a longer conversation. Do you, Representative, and then Jess, I'd love to get my sense is they're going to try and use Mamdani as the poster child for the Democratic Party moving forward, that he has just become, whether he likes it or not, and he probably does like it. He's a 34-year-old man. He probably enjoys some of the attention he's getting. That they're basically going to say he and, AOC, just as where I think we're going to try and say that it's Trump, Epstein, and Fuentes are the representatives of the GOP. I think that the Republicans are now have their new poster child, and that's Mamdani. Your thoughts, Representative?
Look, there's no question the Republicans are going to attempt to make a boogeyman out of Zoran Mamdani, but I'm skeptical that it's going to be effective because I think the central boogeyman of the 2026 election is going to be Donald Trump. Like, why did Donald Trump win? He won, I would argue, on two issues, inflation and immigration, right? He promised to lower cost. Instead, he's done the opposite with his tariffs, right? On the issue of immigration, he has swung the pendulum too far to the right. Like, the majority of Americans oppose his mass deportation industrial complex, oppose the notion of deporting people without due process, without a criminal history. So I feel like the backlash against Donald Trump, against the status quo, is going to far outweigh the attempt by Republicans to make a boogeyman out of Zoran Mamdani.
Yeah, my experience with what the Republicans are going to do is always a little bit different and in some ways a little more acute because I sit next to them on a daily basis. So it's not this idea of like fielding it and then coming up with like, what should the approach be? They're sit to my right and to my left. And I know from going through many election cycles that they're going to say the same thing no matter what. They have been saying that communism is coming and socialism is coming since I certainly got into this business and even before me. Starting with Clinton out of office, it has been the exact same attack line. And that's what makes me less afraid of it. Because at a certain point, it gets dull, right? Like we've heard this story before. We know that this appeals to a certain subsection of the base who will definitely be wildly animated by it. But even look at the evolution of an AOC-like character, right? She was the boogeyman starting when she came in 2018. She has moderated in a lot of ways, like her DNC speech in 2024. No one had on their bingo card that would be the AOC who came into the House, right? That she would be having kind of a standard economic populism speech and, hasn't uttered defund the police in years. And so I'm not as afraid of it as I once was. And there's an element to Mamdani's win that I wanted to discuss with both of you because it ties back to the conversation that we had when you were first on the podcast congressman. Mamdani's campaign animated young people. And the Times did a big piece on filling this loneliness gap amongst Gen Zs, right, who never get out and touch grass. But they did, because they saw this guy who they genuinely believed was fighting for them and who was having fun and joy. And I consistently lament the fact that young people that I talk to, we have great Gen Z podcasters who come on the pod or I go on theirs, like Adam Mockler and Aaron Parnas, and they say, we don't know about hope and change. Like, we've read about hope and change. We can see Obama show up once a year, but we don't know what it felt like to see him accept the nomination in 2008, to win, to get inaugurated. Like, any of these moments are historical events. We only know Donald Trump. And seeing young people have political joy, even though it's not my politics, really touched me. And I'm excited about that aspect.
Look, it's really interesting. I had not connected the two. What's interesting is this turned out young people, and oddly, young people and young non-whites, whereas the No Kings protests seemed to be like the audience from Murder, She Wrote. It seemed like a bunch of old white people or people my age, which is fine, but it's just haven't thought about what that means. I'm curious, Representative, I always think it's the boring stuff that moves the needle. And I wonder if the more consequential election was actually the Prop 50 results. One, it's provided serious pushback to the attempt to, in my opinion, it feels like we're fighting fire with fire. I don't like it conceptually, but it said, look, if you're going to show up to a fight with a machine gun, we're going to show up with a machine gun as well, as opposed to a squirt gun and a lot of indignance. And I'm hoping it's kind of cauterized this movement to try and rig Congress, if you will. But I would also offer that it has cemented Governor Newsom as the front runner right now, which, by the way, is a curse. Like Herman Cain, Rudy Giuliani, Fred Thompson, they were all the front runner, early front runner. But I would argue that Governor Newsom is now squarely the front runner. Your thoughts, Representative?
I mean, arguably the single greatest winner last night, other than the candidates themselves, was Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
Because when Republicans were attempting to rig our democracy through mid-decade redistricting to an extent that is unprecedented, Gavin Newsom, to his credit, was the first governor to act decisively, to respond. And he spent real political capital on the proposition, and he won. And Democrats are now likely to recapture the House, largely because of what he did. And that's something for which he deserves enormous credit. Now, of course, the greatest threat is the Section 2 case in the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court strikes down Section 2, then
can you say more about that, Representative?
Yeah, so, Section... As you know, after the failure of Reconstruction and with the rise of Jim Crow, the South went essentially a century without any Black representation. Like, we're not for the Voting Rights Act and Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, there would be no Black representatives in the South. And so Section 2 essentially requires the creation of majority Black, majority minority districts in the South where people of color have historically been disenfranchised and underrepresented. If Section 2 remains intact, according to one analysis I saw, Democrats need to win the national popular vote by 1.4% to capture the House. If Section 2 is struck down by the Supreme Court, then we have to win the national popular vote by 5.4%. So the loss of Section 2 makes the challenge of winning back the House 4 times more complicated for Democrats. It creates a structural bias against House Democrats.
Jess, thoughts on Prop 50?
Exciting. And Newsom's margin is bigger than his recall election. I mean, there were, reports trickling in of early voting in Orange County, red Orange County, that people were fired up to go and protect their democracy. Trump and the Republicans always say, no, it's not the thing that you're saying it is. But the American people are not as dumb as they think that they are. And it always astounds me that Republicans don't make that connection, that they're actually doing a lot of the speaking down to people that they accuse Democrats of doing. And I'm not giving us a free pass. We have our problems, and communication issues. But when you go out there with a straight face and say, no, we're not trying to rig an election by telling states across the country to redraw their maps so we can have an advantage, the American public knows exactly what's up there. And it's had an effect already. Apparently, the Kansas Republicans are now saying that they're not going to redraw because there's a risk of these dummy manders, especially in Texas because of the shift back of the Latino population. Because their idea was, oh, if we have the 2024 margins, we'll be able to win these districts. Well, guess what? It doesn't look like 2026 is going to look like 2024, and you're not going to want that. So, big night for Newsom. I think that that's right, that besides the candidates themselves, it was a huge win. And good on him for seizing the opportunity. His state was in a position that they could do it, like J.B. Pritzker would have, Kathy Hochul would have if they had been able to get an amendment on there fast enough. But this is, solidifies him certainly in the running, and he's going to be doing work to kind of make California seem more palatable to a national audience, because there are a lot of things about the way the state has been run and, features of it that don't necessarily make for a great presidential campaign. But I'm sure he's feeling incredibly good about this. Putting aside the Section 2 part of the Voting Rights Act, which I know is a big one, what are your predictions for the midterms? Scott and then Congressman.
Well, look, I believe if you look at the map, it looks as if we're going to retake the House. It's just a question by, what the margin will be. I think what'll be more interesting is if there's a couple Senate races or races that just, does the momentum carry to some unexpected victories? Like midterms, the party that is not in control, America loves balance. America loves to go back and forth. If we don't retake the House, that would probably be, well, I think we're going to. It's a question of what the margin is. I'm looking at if there's some surprises somewhere in a red state, maybe even a Senate, we get a Senate seat we weren't expecting. I wonder if that kind of momentum is there. But, and that's a broader question I want to put to the representative. There's just been so many stories about how the Democratic Party is less popular than it's ever been. As bad as Trump is, the Democratic Party is less popular. That feels like that's a summary of all political articles over the last few months. And last night, it feels like that narrative was somewhat spoiled. I would argue objectively, the candidate quality on the Republican side was really weak, that they kind of gave us a softball to hit there. And the candidate quality on the Democratic side was really strong. But do you think this is maybe a seminal moment where the tide has shifted back from what felt like just a massive amount of GOP momentum to Democratic momentum?
Look, I'm optimistic about the midterms because Donald Trump has a long history of performing badly in midterm elections, as he did in his first presidency. And when Donald Trump is president, but not on the ballot, that's when Democrats do best. I agree with you that the Democratic Party is often punitively self-critical, but I feel like a turning point came when the party made the decision not to vote for the Republican CR, but to fight for the enhanced premium tax credits for the Obamacare. Like, I think that was a moment when we sent a powerful message to our base that we are able and willing to fight Donald Trump. And that's what the base is looking for. The base wants us to fight Donald Trump. And the latest election results revealed that Democrats have the momentum entering the midterms and that Donald Trump has become unpopular. And all the gains that he made among historic constituencies of the Democratic Party have all but dissipated. And that those voters have returned home to the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I'm always torn about the strategy of just running against Donald Trump, because on the one hand, I like to win, and that usually produces a win. But on the other hand, it's a political crutch that you can't rely on forever. Like, he will be gone in 2028. Whoever his successor is, will be a Trump acolyte. Maybe it's J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio. I'm not particularly sure, but they won't be a lightning rod in the same way. And I thought that Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill really threaded the needle well in having this positive, forward-looking message that combined all of these different ideological elements of the party right now. Like, they sounded abundance-pilled, and sometimes they sounded Bernie Sanders pilled, right? And Abigail Spanberger led with, this was a vote for pragmatism, but also for dreaming big and for what's possible. And so I'm very excited, but also hopeful that this turns into real hard work on the part of the party to have a national uplifting message that is not, this guy sucks, but like, we earned this, or we deserve your vote because of our vision.
Representative, just shifting gears for a second to the shutdown. You're on the ground in D.C. Very curious what kind of the vibe is amongst Democrats in the current state of play. Do you think how much longer would you guess this goes on for? And how are Democrats feeling about their position as it relates to the shutdown right now?
Look, I feel like Democrats, we feel we had a choice. We could either stand by passively and do nothing, or we could fight. And we chose to fight for the health care of the American people. You know, if we had simply voted for the Republican CR, the enhanced premium tax credits would have definitely expired, causing 24 million Americans to see their premiums more than double, rising by an average of 114%. You know, a total of 4 million Americans would have lost their health care. Hospitals everywhere in America would have lost about $30 billion and over 300,000 jobs. And so we feel confident in both the politics and the morals of our position. I do think the government shutdown is likely to end. It seems like Senate Dems are moving in the direction. But we feel good about fighting for our values and fighting for, and I just want to, you know, there are those in the party who insist that we should focus on democracy. And then there are those who insist that we should focus on affordability.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's no need to create a false choice where none exists. Like, we should focus on both. Like, we should defend democracy against Donald Trump, but we should also offer an affordability agenda of our own. And that's what all the candidates did so effectively in the 2025 election, because I see those two issues as inextricably bound together. If we fail to address the affordability crisis, then we will fail to defend democracy. And if we fail to defend democracy, we're going to fail to solve the affordability crisis.
But just the realpolitik of it, one side's going to have to fold here or give in, whatever the term is. And my sense is that the Democrats are very confident and feel that the Republicans are going to crack on this and have to come to the table with some sort of accommodation around subsidies around Obamacare. Where do I have that right or wrong?
Look, I feel like the results of the election gives momentum to Democrats.
It's a great point.
Like, if Republicans continue to double down in a status quo and 24 million Americans lose health care, and keep in mind that 75% of the recipients of those tax credits are in red states that Donald Trump won.
Jess, give you the last word before we let the representative get back to his good work. Oh, wait, you're not working, are you?
In recess, but still working, very much so.
Yeah.
Well, the Dems actually are working.
Working,
but,
just not at the Capitol.
He still isn't going to spend all day hanging out with us. But yeah, totally agree. This was the right fight to pick. And it's been an exciting moment, I think, for Democratic leadership that they were able to keep the caucuses together under very difficult circumstances, especially with SNAP benefits going away, which is hard to watch for anyone, no matter how they vote. But listening to Donald Trump this morning, it sounds like someone got through to him and he's actually reading the tea leaves of this election properly and knows that something's got to give. And I think that the Republicans will put up an Obamacare subsidies standalone bill, at least out of the Senate, to have their name on it. And then I think it would be fine for Chuck Schumer to say, we care the most about people. So if it has your name on it, that's fine by us as long as it accomplishes this while the government is shut, because they will cheat if you reopen it and then promise to negotiate.
Thanks for that, Jess. Ritchie Torres is the U.S. Representative for New York's 15th Congressional District since 2021 and previously served on the New York City Council from 2014 to 2020. Representative, very much appreciate your time on this exceptionally interesting and I'll say it, a rewarding morning for those of us ready for some good news. Thanks very much, Representative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Take care.